Number one.
Miss any part of the show? Every moment of every show is available in podcast form by searching Hans and Scotty on your favorite podcasting platform or online at KSLSports.com. This is Hans Olsen and Scotty G on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Excited to catch up here with Keith Smith, NBA insider, one of the best in the business. We'll be talking about what just went down with the Pacers and the New York Knicks last night. It was just incredible. It was just the kind of drama that you just hope for in the world of sports. And Keith has been doing this a lot of years, such an incredible NBA insider. So we'll get a lot of insight from him. Got a lot of other great things coming up, good, bad, and ugly. We'll get into the Jim Irsay death, sad passing. And I'll give you my thoughts on Jim Irsay. Obviously, I played for him for the better part of 3 years. I was actually in Indy, playing in Indianapolis for 4 years, and got to know Jim pretty well over those years. So I'll give you my thoughts on his passing and much more. If you didn't catch the Greg Skordas interview, Greg Skordas has been practicing law here in the state of Utah for 43 years. He's fantastic. And we went through some of the bullet points of what to expect in this Jake Retzlaff situation. If you didn't catch that, you can catch it at KSLSports.com. That's KSLSports.com. You'll be able to catch that full interview. And if you can't do that, we will probably replay that interview at 2:05. Greg did a fantastic job of giving us some understanding of what to expect and when to expect it. And one of the more surprising thoughts on this was that a civil case of this magnitude and in this situation may not play out through 2026. So there may be some real time between now and getting to the finalization of some of these things. So we'll attempt to replay that for you at 2:05. But so excited to catch up with one of my favorite NBA minds, Keith Smith. Keith, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so much appreciate you taking some time, especially coming off a big game like this. Just give me your 30,000-foot view of this New York-Indiana game and just how incredible it was.
Yeah, I'll use cleaner language than it might have been shouting last night while watching it to keep you out of trouble. But it was bonkers. Like, I've never seen anything like that. The Knicks had that game pretty well locked in, and the shot making down the stretch by the Pacers was absolutely incredible. Aaron Nesmith going crazy, and then that final sequence where Tyrese Haliburton, that ball hit the back iron, and I felt like it was in the air for a full minute before it dropped down through. And I've never seen a ball go up straight like that, the entire arena go quiet, and then drop through the net. And then in overtime, Indiana was able to make enough plays in the overtime period, including a couple good finishes by Obi Toppin to get the win. And that's huge. Anytime you're the road team and you can steal home court advantage in game one, much like both these teams found out last series, that's absolutely massive.
Obi Toppin in the overtime was incredible. It was almost like a picture reverse of the same putback off a three-point attempt. Just talk about Toppin and what he meant to this team, especially in the latter part of the fourth and then through overtime.
Yeah, he was so good that the Pacers didn't go with Miles Turner down the stretch. They went with Toppin to close as the five. And the Knicks oddly didn't have Karl Anthony Towns out there for a lot of the end of the game and then some of the overtime. So, and that's because Mitchell Robinson was so good. But, yeah, Toppin gives them that, super athletic element at the rim. I think they were trying to match Mitchell Robinson's energy and athleticism a little bit. Miles Turner's a good player. It's just not the type of player he is. But Toppin, gave them a ton of energy, and that, he had that swooping baseline finish. Then he had a drive for a dunk, and then, like you said, that putback where it looked like he got off a trampoline to pull it in and put it down. Just, incredible minutes for him off the bench, and that's huge for Indiana to have a guy who can match Mitchell Robinson, who has been quite good for the Knicks throughout these playoffs.
I played professional football, and I've been covering sports for 20 years, and I could probably count on one hand, maybe two, the amount of times that I've been breathless in sports, kind of like the air taken out of you, and you just sit there like, what am I watching? And Aaron Nesmith And his fourth quarter performance, it just took the breath out of you. Every time he touched the ball on the outside in crunch, clutch minutes, it was dropping. Is this something that you knew could possibly come from Aaron Naismith?
Not like this. And I don't even know if Mr. and Mrs. Neesmith believed that he could shoot that way. That was just unreal. I was covering the Celtics when they drafted him, and it was, all right, we like this kid. It looks like he's going to be something. Then every time he get a little bit of momentum going, he get hurt, and he'd be out for another month or so. And it just never really came together. And then it was clear, right, he's never going to crack this rotation and get the minutes he needed, and they moved him off to Indiana in the trade that brought the Celtics Malcolm Brogdon. And then with Indiana, he started getting better, playing more, and developing the player we thought. But, 6 3-pointers in a fourth quarter, including making basically everything down the stretch when the Pacers had to make everything. Just unbelievable stuff out of him. An incredible performance.
So I want you to talk a little bit, just from your experience, Keith, in getting a win in the postseason in that building. How difficult is it to get a win in the Garden, as crazy as that place becomes when the Knicks are good enough to finally get there? How significant is that, especially in overtime?
Yeah, huge for Indiana, because the Knicks there's only a handful of really good home court advantages left in the NBA, and that, New York crowd in Madison Square Garden, that's one of them. Those fans get rocking. They know the rhythm of the game too, right? They know when it's time to be quiet, when it's time to get real loud, when it's time to get behind the defense, when it's time to give a individual player encouragement and the like. They just really good basketball fans in there in New York, and they're starved for this kind of success. So they've been behind this team like crazy, and for the Pacers to go in there and kind of silence them, and then for a little bit of the air, I think, taken out of the Pacers when it was ruled, hey, Haliburton only tied it. He didn't win the game. It was like, all right, we already kind of celebrated like we had won. Now we got to get back at it. But, for them to be able to find their poise again and contribute, especially when the Knicks, I think they went up 5 early in the overtime period, it was huge for Indiana to bounce back in that way, too. So just a monster win for the Pacers, who just continue to rack up these really big-time playoff wins.
Where are we with Tyrese Haliburton's dad? Was he in the arena after the whole blow-up and the back and forth, and one of the uglier scenes that we've seen in postseason existence, where he gets in Giannis Antetokounmpo's face? And is he allowed back in the arena, or is it the entire postseason he's been suspended for?
Yeah, I don't know that he's I know the Indiana Pacers said he couldn't come to any more home games for them. I don't know, if that carried over to the road games. I imagine it probably did. And he said himself that he wasn't going to go anymore because he didn't want to be a distraction. He took a lot of ownership for, hey, I shouldn't have done what I did. This is not what should have happened. So, I think it's one of those where he's at home watching on the couch.
Could you imagine that? I don't know if you've got sons. I've got a son that just had an amazing high school career, earned a Division I opportunity at Utah State, and I watched his every game his senior year, and you're so gripped by the moment of your child and every accomplishment. And here Haliburton is doing this. Could you imagine having to sit at home and watch this thing play out?
Yeah, I have a daughter who's in the car with me here. We're running the soccer practice right now.
Oh, yeah, so you do know.
Oh, yeah. So I'm, I try to be a little more of a calm soccer dad on the sidelines and not get too worked up, but she's a goalkeeper. So that's a super intense position. So I do get, really into it, but yeah, it's got to be tough on him. But, I give him credit for recognizing, hey, what I did wasn't right. Like, I'm not, as much as I love my kid, I'm not part of the game. I got to be, smarter than this. But yeah, it's got to be killing him to be watching from home.
Well, send your daughter a bit of a good luck bump from the Hans and Scotty show. Tell her to get out there and wreak havoc. Moving on to this Minnesota series with the Oklahoma City Thunder, there was a certain level of disgust. I'll be honest, some of the disgust came from me. I didn't like the way they called the game with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and it felt like it was a bit of an MVP treatment. I just want to get your perspective on that. Do you feel like the whistles are treating Shai Gilgeous different than anybody else on the court?
A little bit. I think he also does a lot more to earn calls, but it's when he earns them, they've already, when there's been a couple that were questionable, those get lost because people are like, every time you breathe on this guy, there's a foul call. But I think it's been put really well. I think it was Caitlin Cooper on social media who covers the Pacers, but she said, he moves like a human slinky. So he moves in ways where he does things that draw calls because nobody else on the court really moves the way he does. And I think that's a good way of putting it because he does do these things and these movements that are just, absolutely incredible to draw these calls. But yeah, I get why there's frustration there. And it's, now I think, the NBA, they're sending in, if I saw correctly, Scott Foster and Tony Brothers, who, they tend to not always give the calls that way, if that's, the way it goes sometimes. So we'll see what tonight looks like. But yeah, I understand where the frustration's coming from a little bit. My bigger frustration was after extremely physical playoffs in the last, first and second rounds, that game was, there were 12 foul calls in the first quarter, and it took like 45 minutes to play. Like, nobody wants to watch that much foul shooting and foul drawing and everything else. Just let them play a little bit.
I agree with that. And if they let them play, Minnesota might be able to turn this into a series. But if they call it like that, this is going to be a 4-game sweep. Don't you think, Keith?
Yeah, I mean, Minnesota needs to make shots too. I try not to ever put everything on officiating, especially when it's a situation where they lost by, I think it was 26 in the end. So that part was a little tough, but I think it's their big thing walking away was they didn't make shots. And I thought Anthony Edwards, their leader for the Wolves, was really good about saying, hey, I have to be better. I only took 13 shots, and he wasn't super aggressive driving the ball. So I think he, kind of said, hey, I'm going to take the officiating out of it. I wasn't good enough. The main bench guys, Naz Reid and Dante DiVincenzo, had really tough games. So they shoot a little bit better, and their guys play up to par. I think we're going to get a good long series.
Well, I'm hoping for a good long series because obviously here in the state of Utah, we're very familiar with Rudy Gobert, very familiar with Mountain Mike Conley. This place really fell in love with Mike Conley, and Rudy Gobert brought Utah a couple of defensive MVPs, so everybody wants to see them do well, but, that physicality, you got to dish out. Speaking of hitting shots, do you want to see 12 threes from Dante DiVincenzo ever again in the postseason?
If they're going in, sure. But yeah, that was tough. I mean, that was a rough night for him, and that's what he does for them, right? He's a shooter. He's an energy guy. He gives them great presence. He gives them a little bit of that. When he gets rolling, he's out there, kind of mean mugging and stomping around like he owns the place, and that's good for the Timberwolves. Obviously Anthony Edwards plays with that kind of edge all the time, but if you can get that out of him, that's huge. So yeah, if the shot's going down, I'm fine with him letting it fly a little bit. But man, they just could not get anything to fall in that first game.
Keith Smith, NBA insider, joining us, front office show contributor. He does a fantastic with so many different publications. It's just great with his insight. Appreciate you taking some time. So, Keith, you obviously saw the NBA lottery. You know that there are a lot of hurt individuals here in the state of Utah. Help people understand how significant or how impactful that ball falling at number 5 for Utah was.
Yeah, it's just brutal for them, and this is, the thing with the NBA. There's no guarantees, right, that you're going to get a good pick, and, almost no matter how it goes for you. So I think what is worse for Utah is it's one thing to lose out on the first pick or the second pick, but to drop all the way to 5 is tough. I personally have Cooper Flagg in a tier all on his own. Then I have Dylan Harper on a tier of his own at number 2, and then it's VJ Edgecombe and Ace Bailey. That's more of a eye in the beholder type of thing there. So I think it's then it's a bunch of guys that it's really who do you prefer there. So they kind of miss out on the top 4 prospects by dropping a 5, which is that's tough for them. And then the Wizards obviously dropping a 6 right behind them, both dropping from the maximum possible 4 spots is really, really rough.
Yeah, it's really rough. Obviously there's a situation brewing with the 76ers where they've got a very loaded contract in Paul George, maybe real want and desire to move off that number 3. What do you think the probabilities are of the Utah Jazz picking up the number 3 pick, maybe, let's say, for Lauri Markkanen and that 21st pick in the first round, packaging something together, taking on that very heavy contract, allowing the 76ers some room, and allowing the Utah Jazz to continue the rebuild and possibly picking up Ace Bailey at number 3. What do you think of the 76ers' current situation and the likelihood that the Jazz could get them to move off number 3?
Yeah, I think based off of everything Daryl Morey has said, if they're going to move off 3, it's probably going to take number 5 to get there. I just don't know that they're going to move, even if it gets them out of Paul George. Because not that Lauri Markkanen's a bad player or anything, but I think you land in a spot where now we're taking on his contract, which isn't much smaller than Paul George is in, the grand scheme of things. And I think that's something where if you're Philadelphia, you're looking at that and saying, we're moving way back. We're now going to be with a group of Embiid, Maxey, and Markkanen. Is that really a much better place than we want to be with a player we picked at 3 who could really go a long way towards whatever is next for us if Embiid and George don't pan out alongside Maxey and McCain? I think they'd be more likely to stick. But you never know. Daryl Morey has been someone who is he is done things in the draft before, but he is a guy who has been open about he prefers known quantities and guys that have a lot of NBA success. So there could be an option there to do something where they move, but I think it's more likely they stick and make the pick. I always live by the philosophy, no trade is far more likely than any trade happening.
Well, the number 5 pick that's been rumored here in Utah and very common is the name Trey Johnson. And I know you mentioned him. And we all know that he was a baller for Texas, but do you believe that he's got staying power and potential star power in the NBA?
I think so. I think he's going to be a big-time scorer. It might take a couple years for him to fully figure it out in the NBA, but this kid, the way I describe him is he plays he's audacious the way he plays. He will get on the floor, and he will take any big shot. He wants every shot coming his way. And it's not that he's going to take bad shots. He takes a few questionable ones for sure, but he's not just his supreme comedy buddy at any time. And I love guys like that. The Jazz fans have seen a guy more with Utah. He's been a little bit more calm and composed, but that's what Jordan Clarkson was like early in his career, where it was, I'm just going to let it fly, and this is how I play. Trey Johnson's a little bit like that, a little bit like Cam Thomas with the Brooklyn Nets, where it's like, hey, I'm going to get shots up, and I'm here to score, and I'm going to do my thing, and I think that's something that we're going to see carry over to the NBA with him for sure.
Well, we're in a world of NBA parity right now. 7 consecutive different NBA champions. And when you look at things, the landscape, and you look at some of the potential moves, I mean, we're hearing potentially Giannis to San Antonio teaming up with Victor. I know that there's some potential in all of these things, but do you believe we're kind of in a new age of consistent parity, or do you think that this is a 7-year window before we do find another dynasty?
I think we're in a more of an age of parity than anything at this point. I think there's a chance, we might see a little bit of a couple teams step forward and have a little bit of staying power. Oklahoma City is set up to be very good for a long time because for them, as they have their roster getting built out, they're in a position where they've got a million draft picks to backfill. So if they have to shed a guy or two because of apron concerns or tax concerns, they'll backfill through the draft, which is huge for them. So they might stick around. But I think in general, windows are going to be shorter in this new apron era. You're seeing a team like Boston, for example. Now, it's been driven quicker than expected by Jason Tatum's injury, but they're going to reset that team in a major way. I don't think a team like the Knicks is going to be together for a 5-year run or anything like that. I think we're really in a spot where we're going to see teams come together for probably about a 3 or 4 year run, and then they have to reset. Just that's where we're at in this new world with the aprons and all the restrictions that come with being an extremely expensive team.
Okay, so last thing, and then we'll let you go. Sure appreciate the time that you've given us, Keith. Speaking of a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo, what is the possibility of the Utah Jazz ever getting into a lottery like that with all the picks that they've got stockpiled and all of the equity that they've built up? What are the chances that the Utah Jazz could land a massive star, one of the top 5 players in the NBA over the next 2-3 years?
I think they're decent. What I always say is, if you want to play in that world, you have to have the picks to be able to play in that world. You have to have the young players to be able to send in trade. In Utah, the young players, that's still an open-ended question. There's some guys that we like there, but they're developing, they're figuring it out. But they've certainly got the draft capital there. And if they decide to, all right, let's kick this can even further down the road and we'll trade Markkanen and, use that to get a bunch of more draft picks, that's going to be even more coming in there. And that's how you get yourself in play. And if Oklahoma City can do it, not a major market, and they've been able to get in the mix to land a couple guys, you certainly can in Utah. The other thing is I try to make sure people understand people have a little bit of a misperception of Utah and Salt Lake City of, nobody ever wants to go there. And they've done okay in free agency in the past. It's never been like the super duper star, but they get there. And the bigger, more important thing is, I don't know anybody who's played there that's ever come out of there being like, man, I hated it. I couldn't stand being there. Almost every guy says, hey, I like it. I'm left alone. I can kind of live my life. Then, if we're being serious about it, if they want to go and enjoy the nightlife in NBA terms, it's a hop, skip, and a jump to Las Vegas from Salt Lake City. You can be there, very, very quickly to have your night out on the town, have fun, and then get back for practice the next day if you have to. So I think they're going to be in the mix. And the last thing I'll say on that, Danny Ainge is somebody who, as long as he's running the team, he doesn't really care what people think about the moves he makes or those things. He'll make the move. If he thinks it's the right move to get somebody, and he'll go get a player and say, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to put a team around you that makes you want to stay here and want to be here. So I think all those things add up to. There's a chance. I just don't know when they'll decide it's the right move to do something like that, to go for a star.
Well, Keith, you go be that soccer dad, take care of that baby girl, and we really, really love and appreciate when you're able to come on with us.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
Yep, there you go. Keith Smith, one of the best NBA insiders out there. Appreciate him taking some time to give us some thoughts.